This is the mission 52 organized by Space Analog Station at Marti. Today is October 21st, and this mission is part of the mission. Me, Professor Julio Rezende, Alcin Abraham, Juan Rivas Sadisteban, Paras Adakla, Davi Souza, and Hibrata Mondal. Okay, I'm okay. Alcin, just a moment. Now you are the host of the meeting, and then it's possible you share your screen, okay? And good luck.
Thank you, Professor. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So welcome to this presentation. I am in charge of the launch center for Mission 52. And let me just thank Professor Julio to, for his, for letting me come here and, giving me this presentation, opportunity. And I also thank my fellow analog astronaut trainees because, we are learning such a great deal, even when we are in college. So I think this is an amazing opportunity, and it is something, it's like a stepping stone to the next huge thing for all of us. All right. So first of all, thank you for that. And then after that, I'm Austin Abraham Thomas. Okay. And I am doing my aerospace engineering in Karunya University in southern India. All right. My specialization is flying and navigation communication and anything with related to human space flight in general and aircraft dynamics. So that is my specialization. I'll be moving on with the presentation now. And okay. So the launch center, all right. So whenever we are talking about a launch center, the first thing, which comes into your mind is probably Pad 39C or A, in Kennedy Space Center. So, the iconic launch pad from where Apollo missions took off, the recent Dragon module took off. All right. So whenever we are talking about a launch center, we are talking about, everybody tends to think about the Kennedy Space Center and the Goddard Flight Center. Now, when it comes to Mars, okay, we cannot expect to build such a huge facility with such a, with such a constraint for time and materials. So we'll have to constrict that idea into one, dome, which I will be showing in the internal design. And, that is where everything from the communication to the telemetry to the navigation, of the spacecraft will be, approaching spacecraft, and the spacecraft which are leaving the Earth will be, shown, all right, or, will be communicated within, all right. So within this presentation, I have the internal designs and I have the machines and technologies necessary for the operation of the installation. And, so and so forth. You can see it from the screen, all right. So towards the end, I've added something like, a project of mine. Okay, I've been working with SAE India, and with a team of individuals who are keen on developing a crew exploration vehicle. So I will be showcasing even that, what we can use for, picking up the astronauts from the launch pad and, picking up cargo as well. Okay, so the launch center will play host to the following Marshall activities. Okay, number one being the launch operations, as the name suggests. Okay, of return missions to the home planet, that is on Earth. So whenever we are talking about mission to Mars, what's going to happen is we are always going to think, when are we going back to our home? We may be able to create a city on Mars, but at the same time, deep inside, we'll all be earthbound. All right. So we are going to, because our families are back. So when and where, how we go back to Earth from the settlement we have erected on Mars. So this is a very important thing. So for such a operation to be completed, we need to have two things. Number one, a control center, all right, a launch center, and also a launch pad, which will assist in using the reusable rockets which we landed on Mars, and then we'll be, trip shooting back to the Earth, given the conditions are favorable, of course. Secondly, the launch and retrieval of Mars weather balloons. Now, this is very, very interesting, and something which some people are working on, not many. All right, so in Earth we have Earth balloons, okay, atmospheric balloons. Instead of sending out sounding rockets or using aircrafts which may produce a lot of greenhouse gases, what people do is they send out balloons to understand what the different atmospheric conditions on Mars would be like, all right, or on Earth would be like. So a lot of information parameters can be gathered from this. It can gather the different types of pressure differences. All right, what is the pressure like at 15 kilometers? What's the pressure at 7 kilometers? What's the pressure? How it varies, okay, in relation to the poles and the equator. So this is quite an interesting thing, quite an interesting science experiment package we can carry on board. And it does not take much space as well. We can, it's compact, okay, we can just inflate it using helium. Or the other gases which we find sometimes in abundance on Mars. All right, then the other one would be ensuring communication telemetry guidance to incoming and outgoing rockets. So this is quite important. So whenever a rocket's landing, we cannot just ask them to land anywhere, right? Now we have established a habitat, we've established a home base. So on Mars, so this is one of the major things. This is quite important in nature, because you are essentially pioneering, and you're essentially putting the place forward. Okay, this is the place to land, and we have to land here. So that is one of the most important things. So we need a launch pad for that, if I may say so. And the next one would be aid in cargo pod delivery objective. So cargo pods are something which you necessarily do not need a landing pad for that. It can be parachuted, okay, and it can fall on somewhere close to the base, and we can collect it with the crew exploration vehicle, which I've designed, my friends and I have designed towards the end. All right. So yeah, this is what it would look like. All right. So we have this is the inbuilt, the internal view. All right. It's quite layered in nature. So we have quite a different layer system. So over here we can see there'll be we have the work area. So this work area will be converted with a lot of TVs so as to give proper guidance and telemetry controls. And you can see 3 astronauts working here, and it is designed for automation. All right. So another thing is the cupola. The cupola is basically going to be facing the launch site or the track pad. All right. So where you can view the rocket coming in and landing. All right. So, this is again one of the more futuristic views, if I would say so myself. So you can see the different monitors and the different electronic systems which go into, operating and maintaining such a habitat modulation. Okay. So this is the technology necessary for the operation of the installation. Number one is a launch pad. Like I've said, the launch pad is basically something, which would help you to which would act as a soft landing spot for any rocket which is coming from Earth. All right. Or it can even stand as a launch pad. Okay, we can have venting systems towards the bottom of the launch pad, which I'll show in a few slides. Secondly would be telecommunication console. So you have to understand that even on Earth, all right, when the rockets come in for landing, or we have the re-entry happening, the blank out region will be around for 7 to 6 minutes. So you can understand how the telecommunication plays a huge role into understanding, whether the astronauts are safe, whether the cargo is safe, if it is a cargo pod. So all these things are quite important in nature. All right. So the next one would be the transmitter and receiver antennas. All right. So the transmitter and receiver antennas are basically antennas which, like the name suggests, helps in taking the information in and helps in putting out the information. Spacecraft at the same time, to our home base on Earth. All right. So these are quite important. So next is the observational cameras. So sometimes what happens is, like, there would be dust screens which are prohibiting the landing of the spacecraft. But sometimes what's going to happen is you'll have to do the landing anyway. So you cannot venture out At the same time, your telemetry, there might be latency. So what you can do is you can have FLIR cameras or forward-looking infrared, okay, and you can see the boost system of the landing spacecraft coming into land at a particular area. So this is quite important. Also for other purposes, observational cameras can come in very handy. The mountable screens, yes, that's of course a necessity. Okay, a command module. A command module is basically like a small room where the station commander would be in contact with the rest of the commanders, and they will be talking about different systems and how to receive spacecraft, and they'll be scheduling the operations over there. Then the emergency action room, okay, is something I propose. Emergency action room is basically a think tank room. In case something goes wrong, you have the materials over there. It's like a Zen room, okay, where nobody will be able to come in except the people who are very pivotal to the mission. They will be talking about how to solve an issue and how to do it quickly. So yeah. And then there is an alternate power generation module. So all these things, whichever I talked about, are very vital for getting in the supplies. For let's say you have land on Mars, okay, for the next 2 to 3 years, you would certainly depend at least partly on the supplies sent from home planet, that is Earth. At the same time, you would depend on it for more astronauts to come in and boost your workforce, because you need at least 60 people in total to start up a colony in nature. All right. So that is something which I have researched about, and it has been proven true because there's been a lot of research about it. All right. So the alternate power generation module would be an extremely important criteria over here. We have power already from the power station. All right. But then in case something's going wrong, we do not want to keep things to chance. All right. Because space is all about redundancy. All right. And the mission command sub modules. Okay. The sub modules are basically like telecommunication. Okay. We would have a guidance and control. Okay. We would have a life support system. So there will be one astronaut or one crew member assigned for each of these particular roles, which would specifically they will be monitoring it and understanding whether everything is going all right. Then high speed internet module, intranet. Now why I specifically put intranet is because see, when you compare internet to the intranet, internet is connected to the web. Okay, so that is like a huge domain where you can search anything you want. But then intranet is basically something like if you have a habitat, and it's very, very useful for quarantine situation. If you have Habitat Mate, okay, we have different modules. We can stay connected with each other through an intranet facility. Okay, we do not necessarily need to connect to the internet on Earth. We can connect to the intranet, and sometimes if we request it, we can download some web pages from the internet back on Earth and then put it as a cache, CASHE, on the internet, so people can browse it as well. So for example, Wikipedia can be put as an intranet cache. Okay, but at the same time, you can communicate with each other at the same time. So yeah. Then the decontamination and pressurization bay, it's a small bay, because it's the proximity to the launch pad. In case people are coming in, we need to decontaminate them. We do not know what exactly they're going to drag into the habitat as well. All right, so this would be something, something in a large scale landing base. I would say not exactly the first few months, it wouldn't look like this. Okay, this is probably like 10 years into the future, or 7 years into the future at least, because you would require a lot of resources to build this up. All right, so this is probably what it would look like. All right, something like that. And this is, you people who might be familiar with the spacecraft, okay, by SpaceX. So that's I was rendering, and probably this is one of the most realistic models. All right, so you can have something like a deflection zone over here, which would specifically deflect the heat energy. At the same time, you would have enough enough space for putting out cargo and etc. All right, so this is what it would look like. Now, possible resources to generate and operate it, we would have to have a group of telecommunications, because like I said before, there will be telecommunication blackouts. Now, even when we are on Earth, sometimes our GPS don't work, okay, or sometimes our navigation system doesn't work. Why? because there might be certain atmospheric conditions which prohibit the transmitting and receiving of certain signals. Now, imagine a situation where you do not have any satellites or minimal, I would say around 4 to 5, which are reliable on Mars. So how would you deal with it? How you would deal with it, and it would basically define how well you're connected with the home planet and how well they can problem solve for you. Okay, because let's face it, 100 heads are better than a couple. All right, so you need telecommunication, because without telecommunication you will not be able to do anything. All right, you would need clearances obviously in the first few stages of the mission, so you need to communicate with others at the same time. So what we would propose is having a relay of CubeSats, all right, around the orbit of Mars, and these CubeSats can relay the information within each other and then send it to a major satellite. All right, let's say the Mars orbiter mission or the reconnaissance mission, and they will be relaying the same to the Earth. Now, in case that is not possible, if the distance is too great, what we can do is we can relay it off satellites of the moon, okay, using the Artemis program's lunar gateway that might have a receiving station, and we can thus relay it to the Earth in the long run. Now, when it comes to management, this is what it would look like. We do not, like I said, we do not need a lot of people. All right, we are focusing on automation, okay, and thus, would eliminate the need of a lot of people at the end of the day. And facility chief, obviously, yes, that would be there, and then he would be there. He or she would be responsible for the entire show. Now, facility chief reports directly to the commander. Right? There is no other, hierarchy to be followed over here. Now, the launch and recovery supervisor. So when it comes to the launch and recovery supervisor, as the name suggests, he would be in charge of basically any rocket coming in for landing and taking off from the launch pad on Mars. Now, under the launch and recovery supervisor, we would have a telemetry and communication in charge. Now, he's the one who would be talking about, he would be the one who is very familiarized with the communication equipment, all right, and how to relay information from one place to another. Now, this is quite important, all right. And then the next one would be the support systems in charge. Now, the support systems in charge would be in charge of a lot of parameters, for example, all the way from propellants to onboard oxygen. And we would have a lot of, onboard avionics. All these systems come under him. So basically you will have the crew will have to relay the information to him, and he'll be in charge of that. Now, you have to understand that all of these astronauts are, looking in front of screens, and, it's basically like a command center on Earth. All right. So the next one would be flight or crew in charge. Now, this would most probably be somebody who's in the biomedical industry, who has a little bit of experience in the medical field and how a human body would react to microgravity. At the same time, he or she would be having a little bit of, I think a degree in aerospace or aeronautics would be great. All right. So I would talk about the qualifications later on. Now we have the engineering attaché. So the engineering attaché would be coming obviously from the engineering center. Okay. So the engineering attaché would be talking and, would be talking with the supervisor, and he would be reporting to the chief. And he would be talking how, well versed are the systems, or we need replacements, or do we need a maintenance schedule? If there's a maintenance, in requirement, he would directly talk to it to the facility chief, and the facility chief will assign the technical attaché to go and, try sorting or troubleshooting the issue. And the technical attaché is quite important because you'd have the engineering knowledge, all right, you have the theoretical knowledge. Now, who is the one who's going to do the repairs? All right, that comes under the technical attaché. So he would be the ones who would be correcting the, maybe if the antennas are off course, he would be trying to move it in the correct direction and all this kind of stuff. So he's quite an important part of the center. Now, when it comes to the position astronaut profile, so the facility in charge would need to have a master's in engineering aerospace, okay, and he would need to have flight experience, okay, he needs to have leadership qualities, risk management assessment capabilities, extremely good communication skills, and sometimes language proficiency, because even in the mission 52 we are in right now, there are people from Brazil, there are people from Spain, okay, there are people from India, okay, so it is quite a task itself, because sometimes they're comfortable with their own language and they'll be able to explain something in their own language a little bit better. So he would have to know at least like 2 or 3 languages more, okay, other than the common tongue that is English, maybe Spanish and maybe Russian, maybe. Okay. So yeah. All right. So the next one is a launch and recovery supervisor. He would require a PhD in engineering because in any engineering. But then the issue is the reason why I'm telling you he has to have a PhD is basically because he needs to know the lay of the land. Basically, he needs to understand what the other engineers are doing. Okay, so he would probably know about this if he has taken a PhD, and he would have had people. He would have worked under people, and he would know how to deal with situations. All right. So the engineering attaché, again, PhD in engineering would be something which is great. Okay, leadership qualities, risk management, etc. Technical attaché, previous mechanical work experience. All right, so this is quite important. Okay, communication skills, masters in mechanical is what we would prefer. The telemetry and comms in charge, masters in telecommunication engineering is a must, and communication skills is a must. Support systems in charge is masters in mechanical engineering, along with the communication skills required for the mission. And the flight crew in charge would be the person who is into biomedical engineering. Okay, now the training program. All right. So since I am from the part of the aerospace industry where you require you would be interested into flying. So I have a little bit of a knowledge when it comes to what actual training you need to get into the flying sector. Okay, or anything with regard to the launch and recovery of aircraft or spacecraft. All right. So number one, you would need orbital mechanics. Okay, orbital mechanics means coming under the 2-line elements. Okay, eccentricity, apogee, perigee, all these kind of periphery factors you would need to know, because you would exactly need to know when to make fire the retro thrusters, etc. So then the next one will be propellant handling characteristics. So we are dealing with a lot of propellants over here, so that's quite important. Telecommunication architectures, we have point-to-point communication, we have ground-based architecture. So all these things you would need to know in case of an emergency. Launchpad maintenance. Okay, this is quite an interesting one, because after every launch, what's going to happen is you will have residual material, okay, which would be on the launch pad. So you need to clear it out, okay, because even when you're launching an aircraft carrier, you would do something. The crew of the ship would, in general, every morning would go around a walk. So basically, all of them, stand up in a line, and then they go through the flight deck, and then they check if there is any foreign object. So what happens is, if you do not do the launch pad maintenance, there will be FOD, or foreign object debris. All right. So you need to remove that, okay, because it can play a lot of heat to the engine, and things can go wrong in a matter of a second. Then we have to learn about external Martian vehicle guidance protocols. So this is quite important, because after a set, maybe let's say 3 kilometers, you lose communication with the rover. You need to do something about it. You need to maybe uplink the frequency, or you need to have a down rating system. A lot of things like that. All right. So stress management is also one of the things. Okay, when you're talking about the human side of things. The optical and telemetry guidance is another thing. The precision approach. All right. So this is quite important. Okay. People who are familiar with the SpaceX Falcon 9 boosters landing, you would know how important this is. The re-entry mechanisms are also quite important. And then latency loss recovery procedures are quite important. All right. So yeah, these are quite some videos, you can watch. Okay. So these are the guidelines which have to be provided to the other facilities. Okay. The whole station. So number one would be only authorized personnel assigned to the center from the station commander will be allowed to access the sub-command modules. Now, these are very important guidelines. Number one would be the authorization you would have to get it from the station commander. All right. Not even from the facility commander. You would have to get it in accordance with the station commander, because a small change in the frequency, such small change in the code or the command codes can make sure that you can put the rocket in a whole different plane altogether. All right. So that is something which is quite important. Okay. Center operations are vitalized, and additional manpower requirement has to be met. That's on 2 astronauts should be on standby. We can take it from engineering, or we can take it from power, or even biomedical, most if we have humans on the way. When active launch or recovery operations are underway, crew members assigned to the station must be in EVA suits for emergency assistance. Okay, in case something goes wrong, you need to get outside and help those people. That's the reason why I put in this point. The next one would be when active launch and recovery operations are underway, it is recommended that the engineering keeps the crew rover on standby and under proper maintenance. So this is another thing. Let's just say the rover has landed off course. Okay, you would need to have supplies, and you would need to immediately act as a task force, and you need to go there, collect the astronauts, and come back. All right, because human life is extremely precious, especially astronauts. Okay, these are not off the lay people you would get every day. It takes years to train them, and it's quite important. All right. So when it comes to the pre-launch operation, okay, so after you remember, so when you're talking about the space shuttle, all right, so we have, launch sequences and launch operation preparatory procedures to be followed, all right. So, when you're talking about the launch of a spacecraft or a space shuttle from Mars to Earth, you will have to make sure that all these, payload and, the rotating service structures and the launch controls and all these things are in hand with each other, because none of these would work if one of them goes wrong. So that is why pre-launch operations are quite important. So after that comes the propellant loading. All right. So when you're loading the propellant, you'll have to make sure that, the OMS, the reaction control system, all the tanks are properly pressurized. Okay. Now you have to understand that the pressurization system will be quite different from that on the Earth. So you'll have to pressurize it in accordance with that. So maybe we can have something like a vent coming out and, equalizing the pressure between the atmosphere and the propellant tanks. Now, keep in mind, you have to do this slowly. Otherwise, the tank is just gonna explode. All right. So yeah. Okay. So there now comes in the protocols of safety. All right. So when the launch operations are taking place on the station, no crew member other than the rostered astronauts are allowed to exit the Mars habitat due to safety concerns. Okay, because it can go from a control to a chaos environment very soon if you do not have protocols. Okay. So when propellant loading and slushing is taking place, no flammable material shall be used in the vicinity of the launch pad. This is obviously, as the name suggests, you would require safety for it. Okay, it is inflammable material. During recovery operations of cargo and passenger pod, the launch center will act as a command and control for the mentioned tertiary operations. Okay, so after the after the launch or the recovery has been done, the command will go directly back to the main center. All right. So the commander of the entire space station will have to be present at the launch center when vehicular activities are going on. Okay, because here is where it's like a nodal point. Okay, for all telecommunications, so you can access the entire system through the modules present in the launch center. Spin-offs. Okay, so when it comes to spin-offs, okay, we can talk about concrete launchpad operations. So one of the things which is very interesting is, we necessarily do not need to have a huge amount of, material or huge amount of, resources spent on building a multi-million-dollar launch pad. Okay, we can have, if we reusable technology is progressing the way it is right now, we can have concrete launch pads with just like something like a stairwell, where we can, put in the astronauts and stuff, and we can have an extinguishing system towards the end. So it can be saved. Okay, that is one idea. Second would be hybrid cargo pods. Now the cargo pods, okay, can be launched from the lunar surface. Okay, instead of spending too much fuel to get off the Earth, we can have cargo pods coming from the lunar surface, and 3D printing the materials which are with the soil we find on the lunar surface is extremely useful. Okay, because we have found out that through research, radiation also can be reflected back. Okay, if we use some of the materials which we found on the lunar surface. So mining of materials from the lunar surface and sending it to Mars would be a great idea. So cargo pods would be an ideal way to launch from Moon. Another interesting thing is, when you're launching from the Moon, you do not have atmospheric drag, so you will require a 70% less amount of fuel, when in comparison to launching from the Earth. So that would translate to costs, reducing costs. So that is such an amazing thing to think about, because we are talking about reusability and sustainability at the end of the day. And this, so launch operation staff minimalization. So that's what I said. When you're talking about launch operations, instead of having 100-man crew, okay, we could have just 6 or 7 okay, with the appropriate, architectures of automation present in the system. Now, impacts to sustainable development goals. Okay, so like I said, one of the major things what we are focusing on is reuse of propellant. Sometimes we can have bipropellants or propellant mixtures which are resulted as a matter of the engine firing. So we can think of systems which can reuse the energy, all right, or we can have a thermal regulation or control system which can reuse the energy which is coming from the throttle or the nozzle of the spacecraft, and we can use it for warming, or we can use it for radiation perturbations on the spacecraft. All right, so that is also quite an important thing. And yeah, now the crew exploration vehicle. So I've just designed it this much, all right, but then it's quite an important thing. So I have a paper developed, all right. I can show it to you if you want, but then I have a paper developed, and this is what the rover would look like. All right, so this is just a fundamental idea, so you can see what a crew exploration vehicle would look like on Mars. All right, so this would be attached to the engineering center, and the engineering guys would be extremely proficient in maintaining this, and because we'll have two of these, okay, one for standby, the other one for primary use. Okay, we'll have something like a cargo based variant and the passenger based variant. So yeah, so the references, and that's it. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.